You know, I want to start this with something I've never really said out loud before. Not to my wife, not to my therapist, not even to myself in those 3 a.m. moments when you're staring at the ceiling and your mind won't shut up. I quit my job to follow my passion, and now my family won't speak to me. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, is that I can't even say they're wrong. See, I need you to understand something right now, right at the beginning, because if I don't say it now, I might lose my nerve. This isn't a story about triumph. This isn't one of those TED Talk moments where the music swells and everyone stands up and claps because the underdog made it. This is about the mess. The real, ugly, suffocating mess that happens when you burn your life down because you think you're supposed to. Because you read all the right books and listen to all the right podcasts, and everyone said, follow your passion, man. Life's too short. Well, let me tell you about short. Let me tell you about the 3 months after I walked into Gerald's office. Gerald was my boss for 11 years, good man, salt-of-the-earth type. You know, the kind who remembers your kids' names and asks about your father's chemo treatments. And I told him I was done. Just done. I had this whole speech prepared. I'd practiced it in the car, in the shower, lying in bed while Sarah slept next to me, her breathing soft and steady and completely unaware that I was about to detonate our entire existence. I remember the smell of his office that day. It's funny what sticks with you. Coffee, obviously, but also this faint scent of old paper and that generic air freshener they pump through the vents in corporate buildings. Pine Fresh or Mountain Breeze or whatever lie they're selling. And Gerald, he just looked at me with these tired eyes, these eyes that had seen 100 guys like me come through over the years. Guys who thought they were special, thought they were different. And he said, "You sure about this, Tom? You're really sure?" And I said, "Yes. God help me." I said yes like I knew what I was talking about. The thing is, I've been writing on the side for years. Short stories, a couple of failed novels, blog posts that 17 people read, if I was lucky. But I had this one manuscript. This thing I've been working on for 3 years, staying up until 2 in the morning, sneaking paragraphs during lunch breaks, filling notebooks in coffee shops on Saturday mornings when Sarah thought I was at the gym. And one night, I showed it to Marcus. I guess he was my best friend since college, works in publishing, always said I had talent. And Marcus, he read it and he called me the next day and he said, "This could be something, Tom. This could really be something." That was it. That was all it took. One person believing in me, or at least saying they did. And suddenly I couldn't breathe in that office anymore. Couldn't stand the fluorescent lights, couldn't stand the meetings about meetings, couldn't stand being the guy who filed reports that nobody read, so that other people could file reports that nobody read. I was 42 years old and I felt like I was dying, like actually dying. Like every day was taking something from me that I'd never get back. So I quit. And for about 2 weeks, maybe 3, it felt like freedom. It felt like I'd been holding my breath underwater for 11 years and finally broke the surface. I set up a desk in the spare room. The one we'd always said would be a nursery someday, but that dream had sort of faded after the second miscarriage, and we just didn't talk about it anymore. I'd wake up at 6, make coffee, sit down at that desk with the window looking out at the maple tree in our backyard, and I'd write. I'd write and write and write. But here's what nobody tells you about following your passion, about burning it all down to chase the thing you love. The thing you love doesn't pay the bills. And more than that, the thing you love starts to change when it's not a refuge anymore. When it's not the place you escape to from the soul-crushing reality of your day job. When the thing you love becomes the day job, when everything depends on it. When your wife is working double shifts because you promised her that the advance would come through, that Marcus knew an agent, that it was all going to work out. God, the look on Sarah's face. We were sitting at the kitchen table. It was a Thursday, I remember, because Thursdays were when she got home early from the hospital. She's a nurse, pediatric ICU, which means she spends her days watching children suffer and somehow finds the strength to be gentle with them, to be present. And I've never understood how she does it. Never understood how anyone does that job. And she just worked a double because her colleague called in sick, and she came home at 7 in the evening, and I could see the exhaustion in the way she moved, like her body was heavier than it should be. Like gravity had decided to work overtime just on her. And she sat down across from me and she said, "Did you hear back from the agent?" And I had to tell her no. Had to tell her that the agent Marcus introduced me to had passed. That 3 other agents had passed. That passed was a polite industry term for thanks, but no thanks. This isn't good enough. You're not good enough. Had to tell her that the advance I'd been so sure about wasn't coming. That the second job interview she turned down because I said we'd be fine. We'd be more than fine. that we needed her to keep her schedule flexible for when things took off. Had to tell her I'd been wrong about all of it. She didn't yell. That's what I remember most. She didn't yell or cry or throw anything. She just deflated, like someone had pulled a plug somewhere, and everything that made her Sarah, everything bright and hopeful and strong, just drained right out. She put her head in her hands that smelled like hospital soap and that antiseptic stuff they use, that smell that never quite comes off. And she was quiet for so long I thought maybe she was praying. Sarah used to pray a lot back when we first got married. Stopped after the second miscarriage. Said she didn't see the point anymore. How long? She finally asked. Her voice was flat, empty. How long have you known? And I couldn't answer her because I'd known for weeks. Had known and hadn't said anything because I kept thinking the next query would be different. The next agent would see what I saw, would understand that this was good work, damn it. This was good work. And I just needed someone to give me a chance. Tom. She looked up at me and her eyes were dry, but somehow that was worse than tears. We can't make the mortgage. That's when it hit me. Not when I quit the job, not when the rejection started coming in, but right there, in that moment, when my wife, my strong, capable, beautiful wife who had stood by me through everything, who had believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, looked at me like I was a stranger, like I was someone who had broken into her house and stolen something precious, and she was just now realizing what was missing. I'll figure it out, I said, and even as the words left my mouth, I knew how hollow they sounded. How many times had I said that? How many times had I promised and failed and promised again? She stood up, walked to the sink, stood there with her back to me, her shoulders rigid, and I watched her reflection in the window above the sink, watched her face in the glass. And I could see her try to hold it together, trying not to break, and I wanted to go to her, wanted to put my arms around her and tell her it would be okay. But I couldn't move, couldn't make my body do what my mind was screaming at it to do because I knew that if I touched her right, then she would shatter, and it would be my fault. My mother called today, she said after a while. Her voice was so quiet, I almost didn't hear her. She asked how we were doing, if we needed anything, and I lied to her, Tom. I lied to my mother because I was too ashamed to tell her that my husband quit his job to write a book that nobody wants, and now we might lose our house. That word, ashamed, it hung in the air between us like smoke, like poison, and I felt it settle into my lungs, into my chest, into every part of me. I'll get another job, I said. I'll go back to Gerald, maybe he'll. Gerald hired someone else. She turned around then, and her face was composed, eerily composed, and that scared me more than anything. I ran into Diane at the grocery store last week. She told me they brought in some kid fresh out of business school, 26 years old, making more than you were. See, that's the thing about burning bridges. You don't just burn them for yourself. You burn them for everyone connected to you. Sarah's family had never particularly liked me. I wasn't successful enough, wasn't ambitious enough, wasn't Catholic enough, wasn't 100 different things enough. But they tolerated me because Sarah loved me and because I had a stable job and we were making it work. But now I was the cautionary tale, the loser who threw away a perfectly good career for a pipe dream, the guy who couldn't provide for his wife. And Sarah, who had always defended me, who had always stood up to her mother's passive-aggressive comments and her father's disappointed sighs. Sarah didn't have anything left to defend me with. The dinner happened 2 weeks later. Sunday dinner at her parents' house in Westchester. The kind of house with a circular driveway and too many rooms and family photos in silver frames that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. We've been going to these dinners every month for years, and I'd always hated them. Always felt like I was being judged and found wanting. But Sarah loved her family despite everything, and so I went and I smiled and I made small talk with her father about golf, even though I don't play golf and have no interest in learning. But this dinner was different. I could feel the moment we walked in. Sarah's mother, Patricia. She greeted us at the door with her usual air kisses and her Chanel No. 5 perfume that always made my nose itch. But she didn't quite meet my eyes. And Sarah's father, Richard, he shook my hand, but his grip was limp, perfunctory. And he turned away before I could even say hello. We sat down at the dining room table, mahogany, probably worth more than my car. And Patricia served pot roast and roasted vegetables and some kind of wine that Richard made a show of sniffing and swirling and proclaiming adequate. And everyone made conversation about Sarah's sister Jennifer and her husband Brad and their perfect children and their perfect house and Brad's promotion to partner at his law firm. And I sat there pushing food around my plate, feeling smaller and smaller with every word. And then Richard, he set down his fork, cleared his throat, and he said, "So Tom, how's the job search going?" The table went quiet. Sarah reached for my hand under the table, squeezed it, a warning or maybe a plea. I couldn't tell which. I'm working on it, I said, and I hated how weak my voice sounded, how defensive. Richard picked up his wine glass, took a long sip. "You know, Tom, I've been thinking. I might know someone at my firm who's looking for administrative support. Nothing glamorous, you understand, but it's steady work. Benefits. I could put in a word if you're interested. Administrative support." He might as well have said janitor. Might as well have patted me on the head and given me a gold star for effort. That's kind of you," I managed, "but I'm actually pursuing some opportunities in my field." "Your field?" Patricia's voice cut through the air like a knife. "And what field is that exactly?" Last I checked, unemployment wasn't a particularly lucrative career path. "Mom." Sarah's voice was sharp warning, but Patricia wasn't done. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, but someone needs to say it. This has gone on long enough. Tom quit a perfectly good job, a job with benefits and a retirement plan and security, to pursue some fantasy. And now you're working yourself to death to support him while he plays writer in your spare room." "I'm not playing," I started, but Richard held up his hand. "Let me ask you something, Tom, man to man." He leaned forward, elbows on the table, and his eyes were cold. So cold. "What exactly have you accomplished in the 6 months since you quit? Have you sold anything? Have you made a single dollar from this passion of yours?" The silence that followed was suffocating. I could hear the clock ticking on the mantel, could hear someone's phone buzzing in another room, could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. That's what I thought. Richard sat back, satisfied. "You're not a writer, Tom. You're a 42-year-old man having a midlife crisis at his wife's expense. And frankly, I'm disappointed. I thought you were better than this. Thought you actually cared about Sarah. Don't." My voice came out stronger than I expected. "Don't you dare question whether I care about my wife. Then act like it." Patricia's voice rose shrill and sharp. "Act like a husband. Act like a man. Get a real job and stop dragging our daughter down with you." Sarah stood up so fast her chair nearly tipped over. "We're leaving." "Sarah," her mother started. No, we're done here." Sarah's hands were shaking as she grabbed her purse. "Tom, let's go." I stood, my legs unsteady, and followed her to the door. Behind us, I could hear Patricia calling after her. Could hear Richard saying something about not walking away from this conversation. But Sarah kept moving, kept walking, and I stumbled after her into the cool evening air. We didn't speak on the drive home. Sarah stared out the window, her jaw clenched, her hands folded tightly in her lap, and I drove with my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my mind replaying every word, every accusation, every moment of that horrible dinner. When we got home, Sarah went straight to our bedroom and closed the door. Not slammed it, just closed it, gently, quietly. And somehow that was worse than if she'd screamed at me, worse than if she'd thrown things, because that quiet closing of the door said everything she couldn't or wouldn't say out loud. I stood in the hallway outside our bedroom for I don't know how long. Could have been 5 minutes, could have been an hour. I pressed my palm against the door, felt the cool wood under my skin, and I wanted to knock, wanted to go in, wanted to make this right, but I didn't know how. I didn't know what words could possibly fix what I'd broken. So I went to the spare room instead, sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, stared at the manuscript that had cost me everything, and I couldn't write a single word. You want to know what rock bottom looks like? I used to think I knew. I used to think it was dramatic, cinematic even, like those scenes in movies where the protagonist is on their knees in the rain, screaming at the sky, hitting their breaking point in some grand, tragic moment that makes the audience reach for their tissues. But that's not what rock bottom actually is. Rock bottom is quiet. It's mundane. It's waking up at 2 in the afternoon because you couldn't sleep until dawn, and even then you didn't really sleep. You just sort of existed in this gray space between consciousness and nothing. Rock bottom is cereal for dinner 3 nights in a row because you can't summon the energy to cook. And also because you've been alone in the apartment for 72 hours because Sarah is staying at her sister's place and she's not returning your calls. It had been 4 months since that dinner at her parents' house. For months of watching everything slowly crumble. And the thing is, it wasn't like a house collapsing all at once in some dramatic explosion. It was more like watching a sandcastle dissolve in the tide. each wave taking a little more, and you're standing there knowing it's happening, knowing you should do something, but you're paralyzed, just watching it disappear grain by grain. Marcus stopped returning my calls around month 2. Just stopped. I'd text him, "Hey man, how's it going?" and get nothing. I'd email him asking if he'd heard anything from any of the agents he'd introduced me to, and my inbox would stay empty. It took me longer than it should have to understand what was happening. I kept making excuses for him. He's busy. Publishing is crazy this time of year. He's dealing with his own stuff. But the truth I finally had to accept, was simpler and more painful than any excuse. He'd moved on. I was no longer the promising writer he believed in. I was the desperate one, the needy one, the guy who'd gambled everything on a dream and lost. And nobody wanted to be associated with that kind of failure. It's contagious. I remember the exact moment I realized our friendship was over. I was at a coffee shop, not because I particularly wanted coffee, but because being in our apartment had become suffocating. Like the walls were pressing in on me. Like I couldn't breathe in all that space that used to be home, and now just felt like evidence of everything I'd destroyed. And I was scrolling through Instagram, which, by the way, is its own special kind of torture when your life is falling apart, because everyone else's carefully curated existence looks so perfect, so effortless, so exactly what you don't have. And there was Marcus, at some book launch party for an author I'd never heard of. He was smiling, raising a glass of champagne, surrounded by people who looked successful and happy and exactly like the kind of people I'd imagined I'd be around once my book sold. And he'd posted it 2 days ago. 2 days ago, while I'd been leaving him desperate voicemails, he'd been at a party, drinking champagne, living his life, and not thinking about me at all. I closed Instagram, closed my laptop, put my head in my hands, and sat there in that coffee shop. It smelled like burnt espresso and cinnamon, and there was this terrible, smooth jazz playing overhead, the kind that's supposed to be sophisticated but just sounds like sadness with a saxophone. And I felt this wave of understanding wash over me. I wasn't a writer. I was a guy who'd written something. And those are two very, very different things. The temp agency called that week. I'd registered with them a month earlier. After sending out God knows how many applications to jobs I was overqualified for, underqualified for, sideways qualified for. I'd applied to everything. Marketing positions, content writing, copy editing, administrative work, even a few retail positions, because at that point I didn't care about ego or prestige or any of that shit. I just needed money. Needed to prove to Sarah that I could still function, still provide, still be the husband she'd married instead of this hollow thing I'd become. The temp agency had an assignment for me. 3 weeks of data entry at an insurance company in a building with no windows. $10 an hour. No benefits. I said yes before the recruiter had even finished explaining the position. I showed up that Monday in a shirt I'd ironed myself badly. There was a crease on the collar that I couldn't get out no matter how many times I tried. And I sat in a cubicle that was probably 4 feet by 4 feet, with gray fabric walls, and a computer that took 5 minutes to boot up, and I entered data, policy numbers, claim amounts, dates, over and over and over, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. My wrist started to hurt by the second day. By the end of the first week, I had a headache that lived behind my right eye and never quite went away. But you know what? I didn't quit. I showed up every single day. I entered my data. I took my 30-minute lunch break and ate sad sandwiches from the vending machine and didn't complain, because at least I was doing something. At least I was making money, even if it was barely enough to make a dent in the bills piling up on our kitchen counter. Bills Sarah had neatly organized with colored sticky notes marking the ones that were overdue, the ones that were urgent, the ones that were about to go to collections. Sarah came home after 2 weeks. She didn't call ahead or text to let me know she was coming. I just got back from my temp job one Tuesday evening. It was raining, one of those cold, miserable rains that feels personal, like the weather itself is disappointed in you. And there she was sitting on the couch in our living room, still wearing her scrubs, still smelling like hospital. And she looked so tired. Not just physically tired, though God knows she was that, but tired in a deeper way. Tired of trying, tired of hoping, tired of me. "Hi," I said, and it came out like a question. Like I wasn't sure if I was still allowed to greet my own wife in my own home. "Hi," she said back. She didn't smile, didn't get up, just sat there with her hands folded in her lap. And I noticed she wasn't wearing her wedding ring. I noticed. And I didn't say anything because what could I say? What right did I have to be hurt by that when I was the reason she'd taken it off in the first place? "I got a job," I said, because I needed her to know, needed her to see that I was trying. "It's just temp work, data entry." But it's something. It's money. She nodded slowly. How much? 10 an hour. 30 hours a week. I watched her do the math in her head. Watched her face as she calculated what $1,200 a month meant against a mortgage payment of $1,800. Against car insurance and utilities and groceries and student loans and all the other endless, crushing expenses that make up a life. I'm filing for separation, she said. Just like that. No preamble. No softening the blow. I've already talked to a lawyer. We need to live apart for a while. Figure things out. The room tilted. That's what it felt like someone had grabbed the edges of reality and twisted them. And suddenly I was falling even though I was standing still. Sarah, please. I can't do this anymore, Tom. Her voice cracked, and that crack was somehow worse than anything else because Sarah never cracks. Sarah is the strong one, the capable one, the one who holds it together when everything else falls apart. I can't keep propping you up while you figure out who you are. I can't keep working myself to death while you chase dreams that aren't coming true. I love you. God help me, I still love you. But I can't. I can't keep drowning with you. I'm working, I said. And I hated how desperate I sounded. How pathetic. I have a job, I'm making money. You're making $1,200 a month at 42 years old. You have a bachelor's degree and 11 years of professional experience, and you're doing data entry for less than minimum wage. She stood up then, and I could see she was shaking, could see tears on her face, but her voice stayed steady. You gave up a $50,000 salary to chase a dream, and I supported you. I supported you because I believed in you. But it's been 6 months, and you haven't sold anything, and we're losing our house, and my parents won't speak to me, and I'm so tired, Tom. I'm so tired. I'll do better, I said, and even as I said it, I knew how hollow it was. Knew I'd said it 1,000 times before and never followed through. I'll get a real job. I'll talk to Gerald. It's not about the job. She was shouting now, really shouting. And I'd never heard Sarah shout before, not like this. It's about the fact that you made a choice that affected both of us without really considering me. It's about the fact that you were so in love with this idea of yourself as a tortured artist that you didn't stop to think about what you were asking me to sacrifice. It's about the fact that you've spent 6 months feeling sorry for yourself while I've been holding up the entire weight of our life on my shoulders, and you barely noticed because you were too busy mourning your failed dreams. The silence after she finished was absolute, total. I could hear the rain against the windows, could hear someone's TV through the wall, could hear my own breathing, ragged and uneven. You're right, I finally said, and my voice came out broken. You're right about all of it. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, took a shuddering breath. I'm staying with Jennifer for now. I'll come by next week to get some clothes. We can figure out the logistics later. Can I ask you something? The words came out before I could stop them. When did you stop believing in me? She looked at me, then really looked at me, and her eyes were red and puffy and so sad. I didn't stop believing in you, Tom. I stopped believing in us. There's a difference. She left, walked out into the rain without an umbrella, without looking back. And I stood at the window and watched her get into her car and drive away, and I didn't try to stop her because what could I say? What possible words could undo 6 months of selfishness and failure and broken promises? I want to tell you that this was my wake-up call, that I immediately got my act together, found a better job, fixed everything. But that's not what happened. What happened was I went to the spare room, to that desk by the window, and I opened my laptop, and I looked at the manuscript that had cost me my marriage, my friendships, my dignity, and I started to delete it. Hit the select all button. Watched as 87,432 words highlighted in blue. 3 years of work. 3 years of late nights and stolen moments and believing that this was my purpose, my calling, the thing I was meant to do with my life. And I moved my cursor to the delete button and I held it there, hovering, my finger trembling over the mouse, and I couldn't do it. Not because I thought the book was good, not because I thought I could still salvage something from this disaster, but because deleting it felt like admitting defeat in a way that all the other failures hadn't. Losing my job was circumstance. Losing my wife was consequence. But deleting this book, destroying the thing I'd sacrificed everything for, that felt like acknowledging that I'd been wrong about everything, about myself, about what I was capable of, about what I deserved. So I didn't delete it. I just closed the laptop, and I sat there in the dark in that room that should have been a nursery, that should have held a crib and tiny clothes and all the promise of a future we'd never have. And I cried. Just cried. Big, ugly, gasping sobs that hurt my chest and made my head pound and didn't change anything at all, but were the only thing I had left to give. So here's the thing about hitting bottom that nobody tells you in those inspirational Instagram posts or TED Talks. And believe me, I'd watched enough of them during those dark months, searching for some kind of blueprint, some guaranteed formula for how to unfuck your life. The bottom isn't actually a moment. It's not this dramatic scene where everything crystallizes and you suddenly understand what you need to do. The bottom is more like a plateau of awfulness that stretches on, and you're just sort of existing there, waiting for something to change, waiting to feel different, waiting for the motivation to try again. Except the motivation doesn't come, not in any grand way. What comes instead, if you're lucky, are these tiny, almost invisible shifts. Little moments where you make a slightly less terrible choice, where you shower even though you don't want to, where you eat something that isn't cereal, where you get out of bed before noon. The temp job ended after 3 weeks, like they said it would, but something strange happened. I asked if they had anything else, and they did. Another data entry position, this time at a nonprofit that processed donations. It paid $11 an hour, 35 hours a week. I said yes. Showed up, did the work, and then that job ended, and I asked again and they sent me somewhere else. A receptionist position at a dental office, then a filing job at a law firm, then back to data entry at a different insurance company. None of these jobs were good. None of them used my education or my experience or any of the skills I'd spent years developing in my corporate career. Every single one of them was a reminder that I'd failed, that I was 42 years old and starting over from scratch, that I was making less money than people half my age with half my qualifications. But here's what I learned. Showing up counts for something. Not everything. Not nearly enough to fix what I'd broken, but something. My therapist, I started seeing a therapist mostly because Sarah had made it a condition of having any conversation with me about potentially trying again. Though by the time I actually made the appointment, I think we both knew trying again wasn't really on the table anymore. My therapist. Her name was Dr. Chin. And she had this small office that smelled like lavender and had these abstract paintings on the walls that probably meant something symbolic, but just looked like blobs to me. She asked me once, about 2 months into our sessions, "What do you think you were really chasing when you quit your job?" And I gave her the standard answer, the one I'd been telling myself. Creative fulfillment, artistic expression, living authentically, all that stuff. She just looked at me with this patient, knowing the expression that therapists must practice in the mirror or something, and said, "Try again." So I sat there on her couch, gray, overstuffed, the kind that's supposed to be comfortable but actually just makes you feel like you're sinking. And I really thought about it. What was I actually chasing? I think I started, then stopped, started again. I think I was chasing the idea of being someone different, someone important, someone who mattered. And you didn't feel like you mattered before? God, such a simple question. Such a devastatingly simple question. I felt invisible, I said, and my throat got tight saying it out loud. I go to work every day and do my job, and nobody cared. I'd come home and Sarah would tell me about her day, about saving some kid's life or holding a mother's hand while her child died. Real things, things that actually mattered. And then she'd ask about my day, and what could I say? I processed some reports. I sat in a meeting. I existed in a gray cube, doing gray work for gray people who didn't care if I lived or died as long as someone filled out the spreadsheets. So you wanted to be seen. I wanted to matter, I corrected. I wanted to make something that would last. Something that would prove I was here, that I existed for a reason. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. And did writing the book make you matter? That's when it hit me. Really hit me. The book hadn't made me matter. The book had made me more invisible than ever. Because I'd been so focused on becoming someone different, someone special, someone worthy of being seen, that I'd stopped showing up for the life I actually had. I'd stopped being present with Sarah, stopped returning Marcus's calls about anything other than publishing, stopped engaging with my coworkers, stopped participating in my own existence because I was so convinced that existence wasn't enough. No, I finally said, it made me disappear. I've been sober from writing for 9 months now. That's how I think of it. Like an addiction I had to quit. Because that's what it had become. Not the writing itself, but the obsession with it. The way I'd used it as an escape, as validation. as proof that I was more than just another 40-something guy with a mortgage and a dying marriage. The manuscript is still on my laptop. I haven't opened it, haven't deleted it either. It's just there, existing in the same way I'm existing. Neither of us are quite sure what we're supposed to be. Sarah and I finalized our separation 6 months ago. Not a divorce, not yet, though I think we both know that's where this is heading. We meet for coffee sometimes every few weeks in this neutral cafe halfway between her sister's place and my apartment. I had to move out of the house. Obviously, we couldn't afford it on just her salary, and it didn't feel fair to make her leave. Not when everything was my fault. These coffee meetings are cordial, polite. We ask about each other's lives the way acquaintances do, with genuine interest but careful distance. She tells me about work. I tell her about whatever temp job I'm currently doing. We don't talk about the past. We don't talk about what could have been. We just exist in each other's presence for an hour and then go back to our separate lives. Last time we met, though, she said something that's been rattling around in my head ever since. We were sitting by the window, it was fall, and the leaves were doing that thing where they're impossibly orange and yellow and red, beautiful in a way that feels almost insulting when your life is gray. And she was stirring sugar into her coffee, not looking at me. And she said, "You know what the saddest part is?" I waited. "I don't think you ever really saw me. The real me. I think you saw this version of me that you needed me to be. The supportive wife. The one who believed in you unconditionally. The one who would sacrifice everything so you could chase your dreams. But you never asked what my dreams were. You never asked what I wanted." And she was right. God, she was right. I've been so focused on my own unhappiness, my own feeling of being trapped and invisible, that I'd never stopped to consider that maybe Sarah felt the same way, that maybe she'd had her own dreams she'd set aside, that maybe she'd wanted more from life than just being the person who kept everything together while I fell apart. "What did you want?" I asked, even though it was years too late. She smiled, but it was sad. "I want a partner, not someone to take care of, not someone to fix, just someone who saw me, who was present, who chose me every day, not out of obligation, but because they actually wanted to be with me." We sat in silence for a while after that, drank our coffees, watched people walk by outside, and when she left, she hugged me. Just a brief, gentle hug that lasted maybe 3 seconds. But it was the first time we touched in months, and it felt like both a gift and a goodbye. I'm working a permanent position now, not temp work anymore. It happened about 5 weeks ago. The law firm where I'd been doing filing for a few months offered me a full-time position as a legal assistant. It's not glamorous. I'm basically supporting 3 attorneys who are all younger than me, organizing their case files, scheduling their depositions, making sure their paperwork gets filed on time. The pay is $38,000 a year. That's $12,000 less than I was making when I quit my job at Gerald Company. But it has benefits, health insurance, a 401k, sick days, the kind of boring practical things I used to take for granted and now feel like luxuries. My boss, her name is Jennifer, no relation to Sarah's sister, which is somehow both a relief and a disappointment because I still instinctively tense up every time someone says that name. She's maybe 31, 32, and she's sharp as hell. Went to Columbia Law, works 80-hour weeks, has this way of talking where every sentence feels efficient, like she's already thought through exactly what she needs to say and cut out all the unnecessary words. About 2 weeks into the permanent position, she called me into her office, and my stomach dropped because I immediately assumed I'd screwed something up, filed something wrong, missed a deadline, because that's where my brain goes now, always expecting failure, always bracing for the next disaster. But she just gestured to the chair across from her desk and said, "Sit. How are you finding the work?" "It's good," I said, cautious. "I mean, I'm still learning the systems, but I think I'm getting the hang of it." "You're doing fine." She leaned back in her chair, studied me for a moment. "Can I ask you something personal?" I nodded, though every cell in my body was screaming that this couldn't be good. "Marcus Weinstein is a friend of mine from law school. He mentioned you once, said you used to work together, that you'd quit to write a novel, that you..." My face went hot. Of course Marcus knew her. Of course this would come back to me. Yeah, that was me. I waited for the judgment, the condescension, the subtle or not so subtle message that she knew I was a failure, that she was doing me a favor by employing me, that I should be grateful someone was willing to give me a chance despite my poor life choices. Instead, she said, "I tried to write a novel once, during my first year of law school. Thought I'd be the next Scott Turow or something. Legal thrillers written by an actual lawyer. Made it about 60 pages before I realized I had no idea what I was doing. I blinked. Really? Really? She smiled, and it was genuine, without pity or mockery. I think a lot of people have that fantasy, that they're going to create something meaningful, that they're going to be special. And then reality hits, and you realize that being special isn't actually the point. Being functional is the point. Showing up is the point. Paying your bills and keeping your promises and not destroying your life in pursuit of some ego-driven dream. That's the point. That's pretty cynical, I said before I could stop myself. Is it? She tilted her head. Or is it just realistic? Look, I'm not saying people shouldn't pursue creative work, but there's a difference between pursuing something and sacrificing everything for it. Between having a passion and letting that passion burn down everything else in your life. She paused. Marcus told me you lost your marriage over this. That true? Getting there, I admitted. Separation now. Probably divorce eventually. I'm sorry. And she sounded like she meant it. For what it's worth, you're doing good work here. You're reliable. You're thorough. You don't make excuses when you don't know something. You just ask questions and learn. Those might not seem like impressive qualities. But trust me, in this field, they're rare. Most people think they're too smart to do the basic work, too important to file papers or organize case files. But the basic work matters. It's the foundation everything else is built on. I left her office feeling, I don't know, not happy exactly, not proud, but maybe something like acceptance. Like maybe it was okay to just be a legal assistant, to just show up and do the work and go home, to not need to be special or important or seen, to just be functional. I've started running. Not because I enjoy it, it's miserable. My knees hurt and I sweat too much and I'm definitely too old to be starting this kind of thing from scratch. But because Dr. Chin suggested I needed some kind of physical outlet, something to do with my body instead of just living in my head all the time. So 3 mornings a week, I drag myself out of bed at 6 a.m. I put on these cheap running shoes I bought at Target and I run. Well, run is generous. I mostly shuffle around the park near my apartment for 20 minutes, wheezing like an asthmatic walrus. But I do it. I show up. I move my body. I exist in physical space instead of just in the prison of my own thoughts. And sometimes when I'm running or shuffling or whatever you want to call it, I think about what I tell someone who's where I was a year ago. Someone who's about to quit their job to follow their passion. Someone who's convinced that creative fulfillment is worth any sacrifice. And I don't know, man, I honestly don't know what I'd say. Part of me wants to say don't do it. Don't throw away stability for a dream. Don't risk everything on a maybe. Don't assume that the people who love you will understand, will support you, will stick around when the dream doesn't pan out. Because they won't, or they can't, or they'll try, but eventually they'll run out of strength, and you can't blame them for that, you really can't. But another part of me thinks, I don't know, maybe I had to do this. Maybe I had to burn everything down to understand what actually mattered. Maybe I had to lose Sarah to understand how badly I'd been taking her for granted. Maybe I had to fail completely to learn how to just exist without needing to be special. Or maybe that's just bullshit I'm telling myself to make the last year feel meaningful instead of pointless. The truth is, I don't have a redemption arc to offer you. I'm not successfully published now. I'm not reconciled with my wife. I'm not making 6 figures doing what I love. I'm 43 years old, making $38,000 a year as a legal assistant, living in a studio apartment where I can hear my neighbor's TV through the wall. And the closest thing I have to a social life is getting coffee with my estranged wife every few weeks and running alongside strangers in the park who don't know my name. But here's what's different. I pay my bills now. All of them. On time. I have an emergency savings account with $1,400 in it, which I know isn't much. But it's $1,400 more than I had a year ago. I sleep better. Not great, but better. I don't wake up at 3 a.m. anymore with my heart racing. My mind spinning through catastrophic scenarios, feeling like I'm drowning in an ocean of my own making. I eat real food sometimes. I show up to work and do my job and my boss trusts me. And that matters. It might not be sexy or impressive or the kind of thing that makes for a great story, but it matters. I saw my father last month. We'd been not estranged exactly, but distant. He called a few times during the worst of it, left voicemails, asking how I was doing, if I needed anything. But I never called back because what could I say? How do you tell your father? who worked the same manufacturing job for 37 years, who never complained, who provided for his family without drama or crisis. How do you tell him that you threw away everything he taught you about responsibility and stability because you wanted to feel special? But he kept calling, kept leaving messages. And finally I called back and we met for lunch at this diner near where he lives. One of those places with cracked vinyl booths and laminated menus and coffee that tastes like burnt regret, but somehow that's part of the charm. We made small talk for a while. He told me about his garden, about the tomatoes he was growing, about how the squirrels kept getting to them before he could. I told him about my job, about the attorneys I work for, about learning legal terminology and case management systems. Normal stuff, safe stuff. And then he set down his coffee cup. He always drinks coffee at diners, even at 1 p.m, black with 2 sugars. And he said, "Your mother's worried about you." "I know," I said. "Tell her I'm okay. I'm doing better." "Are you?" I looked at my father, really looked at him. He's 71 now. His hair's completely gray, almost white. His hands shake a little when he picks up his cup. He moves slower than he used to, more carefully. Like his body is something fragile he has to be gentle with. And I thought about all the years he'd spent at that factory, doing work that was probably boring and repetitive and sometimes dangerous. And he'd done it without complaint, without drama, without burning his life down because he needed to feel fulfilled. "I think so," I said honestly. "I mean, my life's not what I thought it would be. Not even close. But I'm not drowning anymore. I'm just here, existing, trying." He nodded slowly. "Your mother and I, we never understood why you quit your job. Seemed foolish to us. Risky. But we didn't say anything because we figured you were a grown man. You knew what you were doing." He paused. "Did you know what you were doing?" "No," I admitted. "I had no idea. I thought I did, but I was wrong about pretty much everything." He took a sip of his coffee. "Well, at least you're working now. That's something. And I know how that sounds. I know it sounds dismissive, reductive, like he was minimizing everything I'd been through. But coming from my father, that something was actually high praise. It meant he saw me trying, saw me showing up, saw me doing the basic, unglamorous work of rebuilding a life from rubble." "Yeah," I said, "it is something." We finished our lunch. He paid even though I offered, even though I wanted to prove I could afford to buy my own father lunch. And when we said goodbye in the parking lot, he hugged me. My father's not a hugger. His generation is background. Whatever, he shows love through actions, not words, through working and providing and being present even when things are hard. But he hugged me, held on for a few seconds, longer than necessary. And when he pulled back, his eyes were damp. "You'll be all right," he said. Not a question, a statement, maybe even a command. "I'm trying to be," I said. "That's all anyone can do." I still think about writing sometimes. Late at night, when I can't sleep, when the apartment is quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. I lie in bed and scenes will come to me, characters, dialogue, situations that feel vivid and real and important. And part of me wants to get up, open my laptop, start writing again. But I don't, because I'm afraid. Not of failing. I've already done that spectacularly, publicly, in a way that cost me almost everything. But of succeeding, or rather, of succeeding just enough to convince myself to do this all over again. To start believing that this time will be different, that I've learned my lessons, that I can balance creative work with practical responsibility, that I can have both. Because maybe I can't. Maybe writing and I are toxic together. Maybe my relationship with creativity is like Sarah's aunt, who keeps going back to the boyfriend, who drinks too much and promises he'll change and never does. Maybe the healthiest thing I can do is just let it go. Acknowledge that I had a dream. I pursued it, it didn't work out. And now I need to find a different way to exist in the world. Dr. Chen asked me about this in our last session. "Do you miss writing?" "Every day," I said. "But I miss a lot of things. I miss being married. I miss having friends. I miss feeling like I had potential instead of just limits. Missing something doesn't mean I should go back to it." "That's very mature," she said, and I couldn't tell if she was being sincere or slightly sarcastic. "Or very cowardly," I countered. "Can't it be both?" And maybe that's the truest thing anyone said to me this whole year. Maybe letting go of writing is both mature and cowardly. Maybe I'm both learning my limits and giving up too easily. Maybe I'm both being realistic and selling myself short. Maybe the whole thing is just messier and more complicated than any neat narrative arc can capture. Sarah's seeing someone. She told me over coffee 3 weeks ago, matter of fact, not apologetic, but not cruel either. Just informational. His name is David. He's a physical therapist at the hospital where she works. They've been on 4 dates. She wanted me to know because she felt like I deserved to hear it from her instead of through Jennifer or her mother or whoever. And I said, okay. I said I hoped he was good to her. I said she deserved to be happy. And I meant it. I really did. But also when I got back to my apartment that night, I sat on my couch, a used couch I'd bought off Craigslist, gray microfiber with a stain on one cushion that I've tried and failed to remove. And I felt this wave of grief that was so physical it hurt, like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed. Not because I thought Sarah and I were getting back together. We're not. We both know we're not. But because hearing that she was moving on made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Made it concrete. Made it clear that the life we'd had, the future we'd imagined, the promises we'd made, all of that was actually over. Not paused. Not on hold. Over. And I let myself feel that. Let myself sit with the grief and the regret and the anger. At myself mostly, but also at the universe, at timing. At the way things don't work out even when you want them to desperately, even when you try. And I didn't try to fix it or rationalize it or make it mean something. I just felt it. And after a while, maybe an hour, maybe more, it subsided. Didn't disappear, but subsided. Became something I could carry instead of something that was crushing me. I'm not going to tell you that everything happens for a reason. I don't believe that. I think sometimes people make stupid decisions, and those decisions have consequences, and you just have to live with that. There's no grand plan, no lesson that makes the pain worth it. Sometimes you just fuck up and lose everything and have to figure out how to keep breathing. But here's what I do know. I'm still here. I'm still showing up. I'm still trying. Not to be special or important or seen, but just to be a person who exists in the world without destroying everything around him. And some days that feels like enough. Some days it doesn't. But I keep going anyway, because what else is there to do? I ran into Marcus about 2 weeks ago. Complete accident. I was leaving my therapist's office, and he was walking into the coffee shop next door. We saw each other. Both froze. And for a second, I thought about just walking past, pretending I hadn't seen him, saving us both the awkwardness. But I didn't. I stopped, said hi, and we talked, just for a few minutes, standing on the sidewalk while people flowed around us. He asked how I was doing. I gave him the short version: separation, new job, still figuring things out. He told me about a book he'd just helped acquire. An exciting new voice, very fresh, very now. And I listened and nodded and didn't feel the knife of jealousy I would have felt a year ago. Didn't feel much of anything, honestly. Just a kind of distant recognition that this was a person I used to think was my friend, and now he was just a guy on a sidewalk with coffee breath and an expensive coat. Listen, Tom, he said before we parted, I'm sorry. About everything. About disappearing. I didn't know how. I didn't know what to say, you know? And then enough time passed that it felt too late to reach out. It's fine, I said, and I meant it. I get it. Nobody knows what to say to someone who's failing. It's uncomfortable. Still, I should have tried. Maybe. I shrugged. But honestly, Marcus, I don't think there was anything you could have said. I needed to figure this out on my own. Needed to hit bottom. Needed to learn that the world doesn't owe me anything just because I want it badly enough. We said goodbye after that. Promised to get coffee sometime, even though we both knew we wouldn't. And I walked to my car, feeling, I don't know, not closure exactly, but maybe something like acceptance. Acceptance that friendships end, that people move on, that life keeps happening whether you're ready for it or not. So here's where I am 1 year and 3 months after I quit my job to follow my passion. I'm a 43-year-old legal assistant making $38,000 a year. I live alone in a studio apartment. I'm separated from my wife, who's dating someone new. My family speaks to me again, but carefully, like I'm something fragile that might break. I have a therapist and an emergency savings account and a pair of cheap running shoes. I eat real food most days. I sleep through the night, most nights. I show up to work on time every day. And the manuscript is still on my laptop. Unopened, on delete, just existing. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if Sarah and I will eventually divorce, or if we'll find some kind of friendship, or if we'll just drift apart completely until we're strangers who once knew each other. I don't know if I'll stay at this job for 5 years, or 5 months. I don't know if I'll ever write again, if I'll ever open that file and finish what I started, or if I'll let it sit there forever. A monument to failure and hubris and the price of chasing dreams. What I do know is this. I'm learning to breathe again, learning to exist without needing to be special, learning that showing up is its own kind of courage, learning that sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't pursuing your passion. It's accepting your limits. It's choosing to be present for the small, boring, unglamorous work of just being a person in the world. And maybe that's not the ending anyone wants to hear. Maybe you wanted me to tell you that everything worked out, that the book sold, that Sarah came back, that following my passion was worth it despite the cost. But that's not the story. This story is about a man who gambled everything on a dream and lost, and is now trying to figure out how to live in the aftermath. This story is about learning that rock bottom isn't a place you bounce back from in a montage of inspiring moments set to swelling music. It's a place you crawl out of slowly, painfully, one small choice at a time. It's about accepting that you might never get back what you lost, that some consequences are permanent, that some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt. But it's also about discovering that you're stronger than you thought, that you can survive failure, that you can lose everything and still find reasons to get up in the morning. That being ordinary is okay. That being functional is actually an achievement. That showing up day after day, even when it's hard, even when it feels pointless, even when nobody's watching and nobody cares, that matters. So if you're standing where I was standing a year ago, if you're thinking about quitting your job to follow your passion, I can't tell you what to do. I can't tell you it'll work out or that it won't. I can't tell you whether your family will stick by you or walk away. I can't tell you if you'll succeed or fail or land somewhere in between. All I can tell you is this. Be very, very sure. Be sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Be sure you're not just running away from something you don't like. Be sure you've counted the cost, really counted it, not just assumed it'll work out because you want it badly enough. Be sure the people in your life know what you're asking of. Be sure you can live with yourself if it all goes wrong. And if you do it anyway, if you take that leap despite everything I've said, then show up, do the work, be honest with yourself and everyone around you. And if it doesn't work out, if you end up where I am, remember, you can survive this. You can rebuild. You can learn to breathe again. It won't be easy. It won't be pretty. You'll carry scars. You'll have regrets. You'll lose things you can't get back. But you'll survive. And some days, most days, that'll have to be enough.